Introduced to us officially in the 1.3 update in 2024, the Shorekeeper is Rover's longest and only permanent companion in Wuthering Waves, unless we count the relationship Rover has with his duty and with the Tethys system as well. The Shorekeeper is a creature made up of remnant energies, much like Jue and Lorelei. However, her energy coalesces into sonarospheres, making her stand out as one of the most unique lifeforms in the series as a whole. She is the Rover's oldest companion, and the only one who directly confesses love to him. Created knowing almost everything there is to know about the universe, even its beginning and end. However, the one thing she would struggle with understanding were emotions, not because of a flaw in her birth or in her creation, but because by nature, emotions can only be experienced and understood by living life. In order to truly and fully understand what kind of relationship Rover and her share, it is important to know about their long and legendary history together. She was created by the Hay civilization alongside the Tethys system, and was awoken immediately after the waves of the first lament calmed down. Shorekeeper was activated slightly before the Tethys system was, and it is important to remember that the Shorekeeper is not an AI, but is in fact a remnant creature. She is just like Rover, Jue, and Lorelei. Her body is timeless, but not unbreakable as evidenced by the scars on her body. Her forte, like every resonator, is integral to who she is and what she does. Hers is known as euphonic chrysalis, and as the second instance. This allows her to directly use and manipulate remnant energy. This essentially gives her capabilities of spatial manipulation, but much more than just that. This allows her to directly interact with the lament, the etheric sea, and even tacitite. This helps her collect and process raw frequencies, which can then be fed into Tethys for further analysis of the lament, and is part of the reason why she can feel the emotions of others in a literal sense. In terms of overclocking, she is not at risk. However, her remnant energy does show signs of dissipation, leading to excessive energy loss and fragmentation. The processing of lament data causes her an intense and deep amount of pain, and she mitigates it by constantly replacing her damaged parts, just like the ship of Theseus. Her creators note that there are alternative contingency plans should an unnamed test exceed controllable limits. Did they perhaps fear her in some way? Though she lacks the understanding of human emotions, she is fully capable of feeling them herself. The Rover knew this from their very first interaction, and furthermore, he felt this when they resonated together. In fact, the Rover is so in tune with her emotions to the point he can tell what she is feeling without having to physically be near her. Their resonance with each other is that strong. The two of them spent thousands of years together. They traveled together, fought together, and saved lives together. Though initially uncertain why a name was necessary, eventually the Shorekeeper decided on her name. Of course, that being Shorekeeper, because it was the name given to her for Rover. That acceptance of her name, of course, happens slightly later down the timeline. They've witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, cultures, and even witnessed languages become extinct, now existing only as a memory within the Shorekeeper's records. They would travel to various different locations, experiencing laments, but not only this, they would take calm strolls through the fields of flowers in Renacida. During these long 10,000 years, or maybe it's more accurately 9,980 years, the Shorekeeper's understanding of not just the world, but also of people, and more importantly to her, Rover, grew. Even while Rover traveled away from the shores, she would still watch over him. Another complexity of hers was with Rover's leadership. They both saw and understood that events were predetermined, but Rover still fought and did as much as he could to prevent those terrible destinations from arriving, something that the Shorekeeper would eventually grow fond of, but would eventually become the source of her greatest pain. She'd witnessed thousands upon thousands die, and those who worked in the Black Shores she would create a star in the underground depths. That's right, each of those stars in the sky represents someone who worked or once worked for the Black Shores, generally representing a grave. This was a tradition she started long ago and continues to perform to this day. Yes, this does mean that when the shorekeeper called Rover my star, she was referring to Rover himself and saying that the Rover is hers. But before we get to her love for her and the modern timing, the game, let's take a brief detour to speak about the Yanderekeeper allegations. I'll keep it honest with you all. She is not beating these allegations. The Rover and the Yanderekeeper's connection and relationship are beyond bizarre and strange to us. She carves part of herself out to give to Rover for their birthday, telling Rover to enter into it and change it to however the Rover desires it to be. I suppose you can take this as Rover rearranging the shorekeeper's guts, insides, but it's a literal place to go into and visit. On top of this, the shorekeeper has always been watching over and looking at the Rover, always aware of where and what he is doing. Then we also have the fact the first dream she ever had was that of them being on a date with Rover, the two of them having tea together and alone. A unique and strange sense of romance, but romance nonetheless. She is like a wife who has you download one of those tracking apps on your phone, or have your Snapchat location always turned on for her. Though this isn't for control or admiration, it's out of desire and necessity. Wherever the Rover goes, the reverberations need to be recorded. She would nearly die when she would take in all of the frequencies of the universe, or at least of Solaris 3, and compute them, a process she described as drowning. However, her longing and desire to be with Rover stopped her from going through with her plan. She would have died, though I wouldn't consider this self-EOSing, as ultimately it was to try and fix Tethys, though she was still the one doing it, and the end result was still her death, or would have been her death. So that's another small point added towards her Yanderekeeper allegations. The main reason why I add this to her allegations is because it was occurring during the 20 years where Rover was gone, meaning that shortly after Rover left her. And remember, with the Rover losing their memories, it was essentially, from Shorekeeper's perspective, like Rover had died, or at least partially died. She is a kind, aloof, and unique woman. The Shorekeeper can be described as a kudere, at least for a time. She has many ways that she displays her affections to people and unique ways of displaying her love for the Rover. Her lack of understanding of others and their emotions does not make her blind to them. She is aware of when someone feels sad or happy. However, she struggles with the why and the how behind the emotions. She is a mostly logical person, though still deeply emotional and burdened with an intense and long history. However, she finds solace and relief with the one who has always been with her, the Rover. She has picked up many traits from the Rover, such as lying to those who are dying, and being kind to everyone in general. She does not rely on the Rover for existence, but rather, the two of them justify their own existence with each other, much like how people in the real world claim someone to be their world, or in other words, their star, or their shorekeeper. Suboptimal cooking skills, a dislike of pickled foods, and a strong desire to play music, the shorekeeper has many desires of her own outside of just saving the world. Though many emotions are enigmatic to her, she has felt many in her own right. Not through emulation, but through her own discovery. Those like grief and joy, like sorrow and love. Once troubled by the idea of a world without Rover, she is now more resolute than before, striding towards the future with grace and a sense of joy. Let us as well now move on to the more modern information. We learn that through all of this time, the shorekeeper has been physically suffering, that the swirling patterns we see on her thighs and calves are scars. She pushes herself to her limits like any human does, and she breaks apart just like we do. However, she is lucky enough to be able to repair herself. Only the physical damage, not the emotional scars, however. Only the Rover can heal those for her. Due to circumstances at the Black Shores, the Shorekeeper was forced to act as a beacon for the frequencies of the world, shutting herself away from everyone. She would, however, show herself to the Rover at some point. It is important to note that every form of the Shorekeeper we see of her up until we find her in her chair is technically a holographic view of her and not her herself. The Shorekeeper, once freed, will immediately head to the Rover in order to assist them in fixing Tethys. She would, of course, intend to do this by sacrificing herself, though she would first share her emotions and reminisce about some of their past memories together. However, the Rover was completely unwilling to allow the Shorekeeper to end the Mobius loop and decided to fight against Tethys and free the Shorekeeper from the Necrostar, just like she did for him earlier. It is important to note that the Shorekeeper was inside of a black hole, and that if she were to be absorbed, there is no way to bring her back. She is not a machine, but a person, and that's exactly how the Rover views her as well. While it might be possible to create someone like the Shorekeeper as a tool, they would never be the Shorekeeper. Much like how Omni-Man could spend another 17 years to have another son, but they'd never be invincible. If Rover didn't act to save the Shorekeeper then and there, then the world itself would be doomed to a bleak and darker future. After saving the Shorekeeper, the Rover and the Shorekeeper would spend some time alone together. They would share in a duet, playing the song known as Astrum Unicum, Stars, Rebirth, and You. Astrum Unicum, of course, translating to the only star, or the unique star, of course referencing Rover, a song dedicated towards the feelings they have for one another. This song, of course, is recorded in the Shorekeeper's Infinite record. However, that's not all we have of them, nor of her. We have an hourglass, which was a gift from Rover to her. It completes a cycle every 42 days. It marks the time it takes Tethys to make a full simulation and was set by Rover. It also marks the day when the Rover will return back to the Black Shores, specifically as she waits for the day she's reunited with her one and only. Then of course we have her final gift called We Are One. It holds every sound and wave she's ever processed, from when it was just Rover and Shorekeeper alone in the world. And at the end of the record will be the duet the two of them played together. The world began with them, and it ends with them. And yes, this duet is referring to the one in the cutscene in the end of Wandering, where the two finally expressed their love for one another through music, bursting into butterflies and flying to the flower. Symbolism that means love, transformation, and rebirth. Much like how through the sacrificing of Rover's memories, they were both reborn as different people. It of course shares a similar story with the Butterfly Lovers, a story in China where two lovers' souls are transformed into butterflies. They are two timeless beings who resonate with each other, specifically the heart. There is no purer form of love in a world made of sounds than to resonate with the heartbeat of one another. There is no better gift in a world made of sounds than that of a song dedicated to one another. However, this video isn't solely about the relationship about the two of them, but their shared history together, the life they have together. It is such an integral part to who they are that it simply cannot be overlooked or overstated. As for the aftermath, we do once again see that the Shorekeeper is still watching us. We also see that the Shorekeeper and the Rover share that same connection as previously held, but even stronger now. We also see the Shorekeeper physically on the surface of the shores for anyone to speak to, though always waiting for that one specific individual. At the writing of the script, it is still patch 2.1. Perhaps with all that has happened, the Shorekeeper might send aid to the Rover and Renacida, Or perhaps will come to aid us in some way herself. Or perhaps she won't interfere so that the rover can figure things out and find the answers himself, just like he did for her. This has been a brief history of the Shorekeeper. Their stories will continue and branch out even further. The Shorekeeper and the Rover story is not yet over. If there's any history or lore of another character you'd like for me to cover, then let me know down in the comments below.